Hey guys, welcome back to Thorough Capping. It's Dave. If you watched the last video, part one of the factor analysis, I had 50 races completed, and what I did was I just did 25 more, and I'm going to leave it at that right now, at 75, and then from here on out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue little by little with future cards. But I mean, I know 75 is not the greatest sample size when you're talking about horse racing and you're talking about different factors, but at the same time, at least it gives us a little bit of an edge to determine to this point which factors are playing the biggest role and making the most impact compared to the others. Now, as I added the 25 more races, I don't have the data on this video from 50 to 75, which really doesn't matter, but the 11, the target stayed at an 11 as the highest matrix factor at 11. It was 11 after 50 races, and then once it was all done. So the most consistent factor was the target and the target buyer, because the target buyer was at 8.5 after 50 races, and it dipped down to 7.5. Okay, the other dipper, the three dippers though, were the final fraction, the ability, final fraction, and the speed cube dipped a little bit because they were both on the plus side. Even though the ability was only a 2, I think, and the final fraction was I can't remember what it was, but it was only single digits. Same thing with the speed cube; they were all single digits. They dipped down below 0. Now that does not mean they have zero impact at all. Okay, just so you understand that the fact that it's a minus 2.5 doesn't mean that it has the ability rating has zero impact whatsoever, because there were 75 sample races. If any of these factors had zero impact at all, you would see them, down by the really high negatives, like a negative 70, negative 60, negative 55, and so forth. So if it's close to zero, it's still having some sort of impact, that's not much of an impact as the others. Now, when I added the other 25 races, our TC rating index, we'll call it, went from a 2.88 now to a 2.67, which dipped a little bit, which means, just to reiterate, any horse that finished first and had the top TC rating received 4 points. Any horse that finished second in the TC rating that won the race finished at 3. Third in the rating got 2. Fourth in the ratings got 1. And that was just to see how the ratings were holding up based on these factors here. And it came out to an average out of the 75 races of a 2.67. Which is telling me right now between the 2 and the 3, the second and the third top TC ratings have been winning the most, for the most part, on the average. Okay? Now, I know it's not factual, simply because when you average the 1 and the 4, you're also going to get a 2.5. But the ones have won their share of races, but the 4... So this has pretty much been spread out. If you look at the and this should have been a 2 on here. I'm looking at my sheet right now. 64. Actually, this should have been a 4. So what does that do to the ratings? 2.72. So it went from a 2.88 with 50 races to a 2.72. So again, what we're trying to do is one of two things. There's an easy way and a difficult way. I'm going to go with the easy way first. The easy way is, now when you evaluate your grids, knowing this information here and knowing the impact that the qualitative factors have. Now again, the class drop is going to show up more often than a key race. So just because the key race has 4, the key race could have been 4 out of 4. Hypothetically, we could have had 4 winners that which we did, that had key race as one of their factors, and they might have been the only 4 horses out of the sample of 75 that had a key race. So it's a little bit skewed here. Now, what I could do is go back and say, okay, start giving minuses. For example, if the one horse, let's say this, not the one horse, I'm sorry, this race here, let's say there was a horse in the race that had a class drop but didn't win the race, I can start giving -1s. I just don't know, one, how much time that's going to take me, and two, how much error I'm going to make, how many mistakes I'm going to make while I'm going along there. Okay, because that's a lot of looking at, for example, today's race at Saratoga 10th. Okay, we have the one horse and the 6 horse both have a next out 1. Unless it's a dead heat, both of these horses can't win. So this next out 1 factor is going to get a -1 here in this race. If one of them does win, however, he's going to get a +1 because he has that factor under his belt here. But yet another horse did as well. Why doesn't he get the -1? That's what I'm saying. So with the qualitative factors, and if anybody has a better way of going about this, the qualitative end of it, and thinking about it, that's great. But right now, all I'm saying is I'm looking at the number of times the winner showed these qualities. And I mentioned in the last video, the trainer quality is going to be highest simply because there's 4 or 5 different trainer stats that we look at. Sprint to route, off a layoff, turf to dirt, all those unique qualities where these are only one. It either made a move or it didn't. It's either a class drop or it's not. Not many horses come out of key races that you can see in the past performances. Same thing with next out 1 and weight allowances. They don't show up very often. So when they do, that's the best we can do is analyze it when they win. And like I said, unless I look at every single runner that lost the race, that did not win, and that would, again, I don't want to make too many mistakes. So I just want to look at, so that's the first way you can do it. The first way is analyze the factors that are high and favor your horses. If the factors are high, then chances are it's going to finish in the top 4 in the TC ratings. For example, we like the target buyer, we like class drops. The moves are making an impact, and trainer ratings. So if you go and you look at today's card at Saratoga, and you look at those factors right there, we got the target factor. This is race 3. We got the target buyer, or target Briz. Those were the 2 over here. Then we had class drop, next out 1. Well, no, it was turn, move, and trainer rating. So if you want to put the ratings aside for a second, you want to look at you could look at the horses that are in those categories. And here we have the 3 horse. Top target Briz also has a trainer mention. And he's he's third actually in TC rating. And like I said, on average, based on our ratings, the second, it's been between 2 and 3. So the 3 is the 5-2 favorite. I mean, it's a smaller field. We might not get good odds on that horse, but at the same time, that might be a good horse to key, looking at the grid in that manner, in that respect. The other way to look at it is the 2 horse. 2 horse is also top target. He's second in target Briz. He's showing up in the final fractions. Again, don't disregard these ratings now simply because they were in the negatives. All right, because they were in the high negatives or low negatives, whatever you want to call it, close to 0. And he's also second in ability. And he's got a factor over here as well. And he is actually showing up as my top TC rating horse, and that's why I have him in the top. So I think this race, looking at the things the way we've been looking, I think we have it pretty spot on, 263, based on our factor analysis. Because here's the 2 now showing up in those, we'll call important categories. Once again, he's got a qualitative mention, and then we'll call these the backup factors here. The backup factors, he shows up as well. So if you want to look at it that way to make your analysis a little bit easier, rather than just going by top, second, third, and fourth in the ratings, we can do that. Now that's the easy way. The more difficult way, it would be for me to figure out how to weight these factors so that the TC rating shows up a little bit differently. Now I'm going to show you something I played around with. Let me go back to a race. Okay, if you notice, race 4 from Del Mar yesterday. If you look at my formulas now, up in the top here, I took the TC rating, instead of just averaging the target, ability, final fraction, target, Briz, and speed cum, what I did was I assigned weights to each of them. Okay, so that was like a 0.4. So I took 40% of the target instead of the whole 90%. That came out to a 36%. I only took 10% of the ability. So instead of a 90, it came out to a 9. And so on and so forth. 5%, 3%, 15%. And the reason I did that, well, actually, this should be a 40. Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So notice the ratings were a lot lower now because we were taking portions of the 90. Originally, these were out of 100. And these were all created equal in the beginning. Now, I'm not going to go with this. I just wanted to see what it did with, started playing around, because I already recorded these races in my factor analysis grid here. So now I can do whatever I want with them. They're already recorded. So I'm just trying to play around with now how to change the weights where I'm not making things worse. And I think right now I'm just going to experiment with not changing anything, just looking at how these factors, when I see combinations of the target Briz, if there's a class drop mixed in there, trainer note, and so forth, and play around with that and see how that goes. All right. I hope there was some clarity there. I hope that was clear. I will keep you guys up to date. I think more of my videos will deal with this rather than analyzing specific race cards. If I do a card, I'll put it in a Discord rather than do a video on it. So if you guys want to see the future cards handicapped, it may be beneficial to go into the Discord, and I'll put summaries in. I won't put every single grid, because I don't want to blow up that Discord chat room with 10 different grids from 10 different races. I'll put a summary chart in there of each race, who my top 4 plays are, and if anybody's handicapping that same exact card, you can request a particular race, and I'll put that individual grid in there for that race so you can compare your work to mine. Just remember something. When you're handicapping and I'm handicapping, you come out with different numbers than I do. It doesn't mean you're wrong. One, you may have chose a different race than I did to use as the target race, and you may have been spot on. That decision that you made might have been the right decision, opposed to me. I might have used a turf race last out when today is a dirt race and adjusted the figures by subtracting 5, and you may have went 2 back and used the race on dirt and got a totally different target rating, and that might be a better reflection on this horse's form than what I did. So don't get crazy like as far as why are my numbers wrong, but at the same time, don't be afraid to check with me, because again, if you're doing your math wrong, that's a totally different error right there. Choosing a different race than I choose and using the right math is okay. That's you being you. Choosing a different race or even the same race as me and you doing the math incorrectly, that's a different story. Same thing with what numbers you use for your standard. I use a 108. If you use a 107, that's fine. It's all relative, right? As long as you're not using a 107 for one horse and a 108 for another horse, you stay consistent with the numbers you want to use. If it's easier for you to use a 110, then you use a 110, because the addition sometimes in your head is a lot easier to do from a 110 to a 112. That's 2 rather than 8 108 to a 112. I know it's simple mathematics, but when you're doing horse after horse after horse, sometimes it gets, things get mixed up in your head. But whatever you choose to use, make sure you use it for every horse. Like I use a 55 on turf for 5 furlongs as my standard, where on dirt I use a 56. That's just something that's become ingrained to me. And the reason I did that is I find out that there's a lot of horses on turf at 5 furlongs that run sub 56. So instead of having bloated figures like 108 and 106, I just used a 55 instead, so that 55 and 4, instead of now being a 101, is now a 96. Okay, so I hope that clears things up too as well. As I said, future videos are going to be more focused on helping you guys feel a little more comfortable in what you're doing with your handicapping, and not feeling like everything's got to be identical to my figures. If I post a spreadsheet, everything has to be identical. But at the same time, I want you to make sure that you're doing your math correctly, and I want to make sure you are too as well. Okay, that's all I have for you, and I'll talk to you soon.